oligopoly and explicit collusion. Since there are only a few firms in an oligopoly, they can strategically watch each other and engage in tacit collusion. But notice that in tacit collusion, firms don't communicate with each other. That's the reason why it's still legal behavior. But in explicit collusion, firms do communicate. They plot on how to raise their prices, and that activity is illegal. So, what happens when these firms get together and decide to collude and raise their prices? Essentially, what's happening is this: the firms get together and say, hey, let's all set the monopoly price and divide up production so that the total quantity is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And then we can jointly earn the same profit as a monopolist and just divide it up amongst all of us. Notice the idea here is that because there's a small number of firms, they can actually plot in this way to act as if they were one joint monopolist. When firms do this type of overt collusion, it's called the formation of a cartel. Now, there aren't too many examples within our own economy of cartels, at least that we know about. But here's a case where something happened that was like a cartel. The company, Archer Daniels Midland, made a compound called lysine, which is useful for a useful component of animal feed. Um, they conspired with other manufacturers of lysine to keep the price high. Essentially, they were forming a cartel to keep up the price of lysine, since everyone would be cooperating to keep a high price in the market. Formation of a cartel is illegal under US law. It's considered restraint of trade, which is illegal under the first section of the Sherman Antitrust Act, which is our most important piece of legislation on antitrust. And Archer Daniels Midland was caught and was hit with very heavy fines. Okay, so if you get caught setting up a cartel, you're going to be in legal trouble. But even if you can form a cartel without getting caught, it's really hard to keep that cartel going. And the reason is because there's a big temptation for members of the cartel to cheat and drop their price by just a little bit so they could get a bigger share of the business and earn higher profits at the expense of the other cartel members. And even if the firms in a cartel don't cheat, something could change in the market that makes it look like someone is cheated. What if demand fell just a little bit? Then price would fall, and the members of the cartel would be sitting there wondering, did the price fall because there was a small drop in demand, or is somebody cheating? That kind of uncertainty, the sort of no honor amongst thieves problem, is a reason why even if cartels form, they have a tendency to break down. Once again, we're going to look at game theory in talking about the cartel problem and why cartels tend to break down. In fact, there's a very famous game in game theory called the prisoner's dilemma, which does a really good job of showing why it is that cartels tend to break down. Okay, so here's the prisoner's dilemma. Now, over on the left, I have the way you would formally set up the game if you were doing serious game theory analysis. And this is all the payoffs that would come from various positions that the players might take. I don't expect you to get into game theory very heavily in this course, although it's a fascinating topic. But I am going to give a brief description of the prisoner's dilemma so you can see how it's a good model of why members of a cartel might want to cheat. The prisoner's dilemma deals with a situation where you have two suspects that have been arrested, and the prosecutors put them in different rooms. If you've ever watched the TV show Law and Order, you see that they do this all the time. So each suspect is in a different room, and each suspect is offered a deal by the prosecutors where they can go, they can practically go free if they squeal on the other guy. But if both of them squeal, then they're both going to end up doing some time in prison. So in the end, both end up talking because the worst thing that can happen is the other guy squeals and takes the deal, and you're left being responsible for the entire crime. This is exactly what happens when cartel members have a temptation to cheat. If one member, every member of the cartel has a temptation to cheat, so everyone's worried that someone else is going to do it first. So at some point, they all end up cheating and the cartel breaks down. So how can cartels keep going? Well, there are more dynamic game theory models that can be used to show what cartels can do to keep their errant members in line. Basically, firms threaten to punish each other with really low prices if somebody breaks ranks. This is kind of similar to a policy that the mafia has to enforce their code of silence. It's called the omerta. And basically, it says that if you get arrested, you keep your mouth shut, or else, or else you get punished. And we know how the mafia does that. Well, cartel members don't quite do that, inflict that degree of punishment. But members of a cartel may seek to punish each other by charging a price lower than costs for a period of time. That means that the errant member of the cartel pays a really big price. Now, there's a big literature in economics on these type of punishment and dynamic strategies and how they might work. And if you ever get interested in taking more game theory, you'll find it out. It's a really fascinating field. But the basic idea is that if you have some sort of a punishment strategy, all the firms know that it's optimal for them as a group to go along with these punishments. So they all avoid cheating on the cartel in order to avoid getting punished. So here's the bottom line on oligopoly. If because we have so few firms in the market, they can tacitly collude, like in the last lecture, or they can choose to actively collude. They can form a joint monopoly and earn the maximum amount of profits. But it's really hard to do that, and it's especially hard to keep that cartel together over time. Even if there's no overt collusion, firms will still usually behave in a way that leaves them better off than in perfect competition, with some sort of tacit collusion. That is, there's some sort of positive profits in the long run, and they're probably producing too little at too high a price as a consequence. So we can see that in generally, we would like to see more than just a few firms in an industry. If you've only got a few firms, they're probably going to tacitly collude. And there's always the danger that they will form some sort of a cartel that will make things even worse.